Hello once again from the heart of the British Empire, and today we are going to be talking about that Aztec game again. And just like lots of butthurt Spanish people with verified ticks on Twitter kept reminding me that yes, Britain also had an empire. Britain also did terrible things. Don't you care about the Native Americans they killed? Don't you care about those Irish people? And I find it quite funny, of course, because yeah, I do kind of care about those Irish people, considering like my relatives were like killed by the British for empire. So basically what happened is we have a lot to talk about, but I kind of became the center of this debate on Twitter because like my tweet about this game got like 10 million views or something, and just like constant quote tweets. I also wrote on Twitter, it's just like absolutely broken my brain reading all this stuff because the developers of the Aztec game, well, they backed down, and now you can side with the Spanish conquistadors to fight the Aztecs, but you're still an Aztec warrior. So you're an Aztec warrior who apparently can now choose to fight with the Spanish conquistadors, and these people all celebrating it like it's historically accurate, like any Aztec would have sided with the Spanish. So this whole thing is just like really depressing to me because I've just been going through so many comments directed at me talking about why the Spanish were the good guys again and again and again. And you guys remember my video last week where I showed you all these comments saying they wanted to play as the Spanish and kill all these savages and stuff, like really racist people. And that is Elon Musk's Twitter right now. But now I'm getting that all directed at me because I'm the person who started tweeting about this game and started tweeting about how they completely did a 180 on what this game would even be in the first place. And actually something I only kind of commented on for about like 2 minutes in my last video was about how this game could potentially reinforce like racist stereotypes about native people, because I'm pretty sure that no one from Mexico and like native peoples from Mexico are involved in this game, and it turns out they're not. It turns out it's made in Poland by an indie studio, so no wonder that all the Aztecs look like Mayans and Tenochtitlan didn't look anything like what it's actually meant to have looked like. And there was loads of like jungles and stuff like which weren't relevant to the geography of that city. So we have a lot to talk about today, but basically the main point is having a massive far-right backlash against a historically inaccurate game about the Aztecs because you can't side or play as a Spanish conquistador apparently now works. And now apparently these developers who care so much about this time in history are now, you know, developing this game like exclusively for people on the far right who want to either play as colonialists or inaccurately play as an Aztec who randomly sides with colonialists. And why did the developers write that? Because they started buying into all the racist myths the far right were saying as part of this backlash. So they basically given in and framed this history in a way that the Spanish colonialists would like themselves. As we went through my last video, a lot of the stereotypes about native peoples, including the Aztecs, were actually lies created by the colonialists to justify their colonialism, because even the Spanish crown thought the conquistadors were going way too far with what they did to the Native Americans. And that is the terrible Spanish government who had no problem doing terrible things to Jews and Muslims in Spain. They thought the conquistadors were going too far. And these people on Twitter, they want to play that game. So we're going to get into all of that today. Before we go any further, like the video, follow me on Twitter if you want to see me like arguing with the absolute gutter of humanity who all pay for Twitter. Also follow me on Instagram, same username. Also consider becoming a patron. There's exclusive content there, access to the Discord server, and access to my Switch friend code. Trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible. So if you just want to support my work, go check that out, and also check out my subreddit and check out my second channel down in the description. And also, finally, 2 things. So shout out to my friends John and Veronica, who actually bought me the last 5 chocolate oranges to put on my, like, I don't even know what we call this now. It used to be a pyramid, but I don't even know what it is. But I actually did eat one last week, so I'm still have to buy one more. And also thanks to YouTube, I got my 100k subscriber play button. Very, very nice. Like, feels nice and legit. Don't know where to put it. I think we're gonna maybe somewhere there. Thank you everyone for helping me hit 100k, super appreciate it. And I'm probably never gonna get another one of these. The next one is for 1 million subs, but again, thank you for letting me hit this milestone. It's been a really fun journey, and hopefully I can continue doing this job for as long as possible. So, although fortunately I got to study a lot of history at university, including about 2 modules on the colonisation of the New World by the Spanish and Portuguese, I didn't really have a visual reference for that stuff, so I couldn't see from the trailer. I'm pretty ignorant about like how different native groups look, so I didn't realise that not only was this game looking kind of bad anyway, which I said, also crazy historically inaccurate, and already I was raising red flags about the people making this, but thankfully this Twitter user pointed all this out back when the first trailer came out. Game is called Aztec. The characters look Maya. They're in the Yucatecan jungle far away from the highlands. Tenochtitlan was in the cities, and the Spanish are wearing heavy armor in the jungle. This is what Tenochtitlan looked like and how its citizens dressed. There is no jungle here. It's like setting a game in the Netherlands and having the characters fight in alpine landscapes. I'm excited that some media is being about Mesoamerica, but they could have asked like any Mexican person and they could have cleared up 90% of these problems. Plus the art team would have had a lot more fun with the colourful reality of Aztec fashion and architecture. My theory is media make the past look grey and dreary because they're terrified of the high camp that was most historical fashion and architecture. Bring back colour. Some audiences can't take things seriously when they're colourful, and so a grey, boring past has been invented, and just posting a picture of what like an Aztec warrior would have looked like, very different from what we see in the trailer. So like I said, even from the trailer, I was getting like bad vibes about the historical accuracy. Thankfully, we have people who are far more educated on Aztec history, so they can actually show us that, yes, this game is very inaccurate. And it just seems like a random bunch of developers in Poland who liked Apocalypto by Mel Gibson wanted to make a native game about fighting the Spanish and got a massive far-right backlash. So now let's have a look at what they've said of the changes, and let's actually compare the description of the game before the backlash and the description afterwards, because it's very interesting. So on the Steam page, they write, "Update, we heard you loud and clear. You will be able to choose to join Conquistadors and fight the cast of sacrifice-making priests, or to join the Aztec warriors and repel the newcomers. We updated the descriptions. Tenochtitlan will be reworked. The protagonist will find both allies and enemies between his own people and newcomers. We will try our best to make the game more historically accurate," which it already seems to be contradicting in its description. So let's have a look. When the game was first announced, this was the description. "The newcomers from another world, whom we thought were gods, turned out to just be greedy men. Their blasphemous invasion enraged our deities. I will fight off the enemy and free my brothers," going on to say, "It is the jungle that will allow me to prepare myself to fight the invader. I know these areas. It is my home, the place where I grew up. I will use whatever the gods sent me. I wasn't born a warrior. The fight takes place in my home," which is one of the Aztec cities. "Our possessions were plundered, our huts set on fire, and many of my brethren died defending themselves against the sacrilege. Fortunately, I can still save some of the captured." So now let's have a look at the updated description, and the game has been delayed by a year. So, "The great Tenochtitlan is on fire. Now that war has broken out, I must choose whether to join our compatriots to repel the invader, or to join the newcomers who want to liberate us from the priests sacrificing our brothers and children." Let's look at that again. "Or join the newcomers who want to liberate us from the priests sacrificing our own brothers and children. Liberate us. The Spanish conquistadors who burnt their cities to the ground and killed loads of Aztec women and children apparently are liberators to the Aztecs." Again, you see the crowd they're pandering to here. They say they want to be historically accurate. No Aztec would have viewed the Spanish as liberators. And then it goes on to say, "Like many of us, I do not support what the caste of barbarian priests has been doing to us for years. Newcomers from the New World decided to put an end to the blood sacrifices by allying themselves with nearby tribes. Now that war has broken out, I must choose whether I join the compatriots and repel the invader, or the newcomers who want to liberate us from the priests." And then it just goes on to basically describe the rest of it in the same way. And again, what the hell is this description, right? And let's talk about this for a second. So these devs are talking about historical accuracy, and they frame it like this. Like, no Aztec, and it seems like from historical accounts, none of them sided with the Spanish. Now, a lot of these tribes in Mesoamerica shared some similarities. So the Tlaxcala, who sided with the Spanish and helped conquer the Aztec capital and the Aztec territory, right? They actually had a similar origin to the Aztecs. They had a similar religion as well, and they also did human sacrifices, like most of these cultures. So framing like the priest as this elite caste who would just kill anyone they wanted for no reason, and all the Aztecs didn't accept that, is fundamentally misrepresenting this culture. Because if we think about cultures with this stuff, like Scandinavian pagan Vikings, or Egyptians, or ancient Greeks and Spartans, right? The whole of society did not view this thing as weird. They weren't from 2023, and they weren't Christians as well, with Christians not liking this form of human sacrifice, although Christians didn't mind, like, I don't know, burning Protestants at the stake, which we're going to talk about a bit later. So they didn't think this. So Aztec warriors especially weren't thinking, oh my god, I'm so oppressed by our priests, because they literally thought they had to do this to appease pagan gods. If you grow up in a society who thinks you have to sacrifice people to appease pagan gods, whether that be Scandinavian Vikings, ancient Egyptians, Spartans, or Aztecs, then you're not going to think like, oh my god, they're oppressing us, because so many different tribes in what would become modern day Mexico did this. So their framing of this is absolutely insane. It's completely influenced by racist caricatures of natives written by Spanish conquistadors. So to say that there would be an invasion of Tenochtitlan and there would be a dilemma between an Aztec young man, whether he should fight back or join rival tribes that they've been at war with for decades, and some new white colonialists actually destroy their own civilization and people, is insane. But it's clear they've just seen the backlash and seen all these racist memes, and they're trying to appease them. They're saying like, oh, this Aztec has a dilemma. Do I side with Spain? Or do I fight for, like, I don't know, the very survival of my civilization and my tribe and my family? It's not a dilemma any of these Aztecs would have had, especially because Spain were allied with tribes they had subjugated, but also tribes they were constantly at war with. It's literally like the development team are some of these Twitter verified users. Like, they actually do believe this. And that's the trouble you have when you're an indie studio from Poland making a game about, like, Mexico 500 years ago, and you clearly know nothing about it. You just thought the aesthetic was cool. And like I said in my old video, you can say what you want about Ubisoft, but at least when they make a lot of these games, they have a heavy input from historians and actually like native groups when they cover Native America. So they don't do stuff like this, say that some Aztecs might have been conflicted and thought they should side with the liberators, and even framing the Spanish intentions as liberation. The Spanish did not want to liberate these people, and although Spanish conquistadors often had the backing of the Spanish crown in some ways, they were basically just like absolutely untethered from law, from anything really. Their savagery shocked so many of their contemporaries. Their whole goal was money. A lot of the people who were the original conquistadors were like either younger sons in wealthy families, or just people who grew up like not noteworthy and were trying to make their fortune. Okay, I don't want to speculate because there's lots of good talent from Poland. Two of my favorite games, The Witcher and Cyberpunk, are made by a Polish studio and have fairly agreeable politics with me. You know, The Witcher has messages of like anti-racism. It's kind of like a critique of the nationalist interpretation of Polish history, where Cyberpunk, by its very nature, has a lot of anti-capitalist stuff, has, I guess, decent enough LGBT representation. But, of course, Poland is a country with a really prominent far-right element, including its own government. If a Polish development team are trying to frame colonial conquest in this way, it does raise my suspicions about the actual politics of the development team in the first place. So that out the way, already find it completely insane, but like I said, I became sort of like, I don't think the Twitter main character is the right word, because it wasn't like loads of people dogpiling me, but people were quote tweeting my tweets to talk about the change. So I just got exposed to so much stupid stuff. So I wrote, so apparently the developers of our Aztec game bowed down to the far right backlash and are letting you play as the Spanish conquistadors. I hadn't actually read the description, so you don't get to play them, but I don't think it makes too much of a difference as I've read you the description. So yeah, I just tweeted more like about the updated game description. It actually has like 12 million views, so probably shocking no one. This doesn't seem to be made by a team from Mexico. Only developer I could find on LinkedIn seems to be Polish, and he left the project in March. And actually they say now on their YouTube channel, they are a Polish studio. There was another person who worked there who was Polish too. And if you typed in their old name, giantscraft.com, you're met with a page of a Hernan Cortez quote and a link to some fascist imagery on an Instagram page. And I'm guessing someone bought the domain, which seems to have happened as well. But that's the type of people who are getting mad about seeing Spanish people killed by Aztec warriors. But yeah, like I said, I got to see the absolute gutter of Twitter. So people saying, cope, human sacrifice apologists, finally a game worth playing, cry louder, sweet, I generally prefer to play as the good guys anyway. Right, because playing as the people who literally perform human sacrifices is not at all problematic, but if you played as the native side with the Spanish, then you would be doing that. Other stuff, you did the meme, 9,000 likes, sorry, but the human sacrifices will stop. You can still choose to play as the baby sacrifices, don't worry, sorry, but the human sacrifices will stop. Based, you know, all this absolute trash I'm seeing. And it really speaks to like the racist version of history we're all fed. Like, so the Aztecs are terrible because they did human sacrifice. Natives in general were terrible for doing that, but the Spanish weren't terrible for literally just doing mass killings and ethnic cleansing for hundreds of years. Like, that was fine. And also, if we're talking about human sacrifice, these people ever heard about the Spanish Inquisition? Not only did they literally human sacrifice heretics, Jewish people, Muslims back in Spain, they carried that over to the New World. So when some Protestant settlers came over after the Protestant Reformation in the 1570s, guess what the Inquisition did? They literally burnt them at the stake in the New World. So not only had they done that back home, they were now doing it in the New World as well, where apparently if you're in the New World and you do human sacrifice, you deserve just terrible things to happen to you. So what is it? Is it that the Aztecs are terrible for doing this and they deserve their fate, but Spain can do it, no problem, because you are just like a massive racist? Like, the hypocrisy is so staggering. And it always makes me laugh is, I bet all these people saying that they want to play as the good guys also like Vikings. People on the right wing and far right who love the Vikings and Spartans, they don't see the hypocrisy there, because it's not about the human sacrifice. The human sacrifice is just a justification for their racism, and it's to hide behind. And they would say, well, Cortez sided with the natives and the Aztecs were terrible. And like the game devs are saying, it was a conflict in someone's mind in Tenochtitlan about whether I should side with a rival tribe in the Spanish or side with my own people, because the priests are barbarians. It literally said that in the description. The priests are barbarians who sacrifice my brothers and sisters and babies and stuff. But when Spartans and Vikings do it, no one cares. They're awesome. The best fighters the world has ever seen, despite the fact they were insanely brutal and they did human sacrifices to pagan gods too. Apparently they haven't got a bad word to say. And also, like, there were a lot of Spanish people coping as well and saying it was a good thing. They brought Christianity, they brought civilization to Mexico. And all I would say is, do you feel the same about the Arab conquest of Spain? I bet you don't. If I wanted to make the argument that, I don't know, Muslim empires had a better relationship with like people being educated, had a better relationship with preserving like the Greek classics and stuff. You only know about a lot of the Greek classics because Arab empires translated them into Arabic and then sometimes let Christian priests translate them into European languages and stuff. If I then said everything the Muslim empires did to Spain was 100% justified because the Christians were backwards or something, would you accept that? I doubt you would, Spanish people. So why do you say that when it comes to the New World? And especially now, it's not the 1600s. We're not relying on accounts from conquistadors who said terrible things and lies to justify their colonialism. We know that these societies were pretty advanced for their time as well. We know these massive cities they built and their culture in general was advanced. But not that that even really matters because they shouldn't have been, you know, conquered anyway by Europeans. But at the same time, Aztec civilization basically meets most of the criteria of what European civilization was at the time. But apparently because of the human sacrifices to their pagan gods, these people were uncivilized and deserved just absolutely terrible things to be done to them. And like I said, so bad that it even shocked the Spanish crown, who had just completed like the Reconquista and done the Inquisition. This is the stuff that these people want to defend. And it's just depressing because it shows you that so many people who are conservatives or even centrists, fundamentally, they are fascists at the end of the day because they just justify terrible things that our society was built on. And also the stuff we're talking about in this period of history, it literally created white supremacy. It literally created the foundations for the racist system we now live in, literally creating a hierarchy of races. We're going to talk about like the Spanish plantations, but they literally were like, if you are African, you are bottom of the racist hierarchy. If you're white Spanish born in Spain, you are the top and everyone else falls somewhere in between. Right-wing people caring about historical accuracy is never about historical accuracy. It's about creating a historical narrative they agree with, even if it's just complete lies. So we had the last third of the video last week talking about the history. I want to talk a bit more about the history and actually some personal testimony from Spanish people at the time who thought it was going way too far, to show you how crazy these people are on Twitter telling me this stuff was good. The Spanish were the good guys, when Spanish at the time was saying these people were monsters, right? 500 years ago, there were people in Spanish society who knew this was terrible. And in 2023, I got a bunch of Americans and Spanish people with verified ticks on Elon Musk's hell site of Twitter telling me it was a good thing. So let's get into this. So an article I was reading from Christina Charleston from the Graduate Journal, and there's some really good primary source quotes here, so I'm going to read some of them to you. So we've mentioned the encomiendas lately, and it's basically this tribute system that the natives would pay their tax to the Spanish through labor. And basically what it became was brutal slave labor, essentially, and it also helped create the racial hierarchy. So this started in 1512. So under the encomienda system, conquistadors and other leaders received grants of a number of natives whom they could extract tribute in the form of gold or labor. These were supposed to protect and Christianize the natives, but they most often used the system effectively to enslave the natives and take their land. While designed to take the place of slavery, its system did little more than to rebrand it. A year after they came into existence, El Requirimiento was issued, and the hostility towards the native population increased. Its foreboding tone was more than a threat. It was a promise written directly to them, not that they understood the language. So, wherefore, as best we can, we ask and require you, acknowledge the church as the ruler and superior of the whole world. But if you do not do this and make delay in it, I certify to you, with the help of God, we shall powerfully enter into your country and shall make war against you in all ways and manners that we can, and shall subject you to the yoke and obedience of the church and of their highnesses. We shall take you and your wives and your children, and shall make slaves of them all, and as such shall sell and dispose them, as their highnesses may command. And we shall take away your goods, and we shall do you all the mischief and damage we can, as to vassals who do not obey, and refuse to receive their lord, and resist and contradict them, and we protest that the deaths and losses which shall accrue from this are your fault, and not that of their highnesses or ours, nor of these cavaliers who come with us. When you realise that Christopher Columbus saw his colonisation of the New World as an extension of the Crusades against Muslims, you start to understand why this sort of language is used. They basically believe they're on a crusade still. And at this time as well, there were papal bulls being passed that were basically saying that if you see any African people, because they are godless heathens, you can enslave them and kill them and do whatever, because that's what God would want. And that's why you see all this religious language here. Like, if you reject God, reject our way of life, we will do everything to you. We will do mischief to you, which you can imagine what that meant, because there's lots of records of them doing it. They say these are the good guys. These are the good guys. Imagine anyone coming to your country, modern context or whatever, and writing a rule like this. I'm sure everyone who was tweeting me about the Spanish being good guys, if Russia captured Ukrainian towns and put something like this up, they all think that's bad, don't they? Russia aren't the good guys in this situation. Why are Spain the good guys for doing this? So this guy is seen as kind of like the modern father of human rights, called Friar Bartolome de las Casas, who was an advocate for the indigenous peoples of the New World and was the main source of what we know of the atrocities committed. His brief account of the destruction of the Indies is a detailed and thorough account of multiple acts of physical violence in the New World. Europe's curiosity of this new place became tainted by what de las Casas wrote in his new book, and this became the birth of the black legend of Spain's notorious treatment of these foreign people. He cites the huge death toll and annihilation of many groups of peaceful natives at the hands of the greedy and cruel Spaniards. So I'm going to read one for you. And the Christians, with their horses and swords and pikes, began to carry out massacres and strange cruelties against them. They attacked the towns and spared neither the children, nor the aged, nor the pregnant, nor women in childbed, as if dealing with sheep in a slaughterhouse. They laid bets as to who, with one stroke of the sword, could split a man in two. They took infants from their mothers and threw them into rivers, roaring with laughter, saying as if the babies fell into the water, "Boil there, you offspring of the devil." Other infants they put to the sword alongside their mothers and anyone else who happened to be nearby. De las Casas was not perfect nor innocent. He was initially interested in converting the natives. He was also guilty of initially encouraging the transportation of African slaves to free the Indians, which he later recanted, finally coming to the conclusion that all slavery is bad. Without the intervention of de las Casas, the treatment of the natives could have been far worse. He was responsible for swaying the king to implement the new laws of 1542, which lessened the control of the Encomenderos. He argued for humanity of all men, and his arguments were way before their time and a precursor to human rights and the proclamation set forth to the UN. So obviously flawed in his own way, but also shows you that not everyone there thought what Spain were doing was good. And the new laws were passed, but it didn't really change much in the new world. The natives were still treated brutally, treated terribly by the Catholic Church and the Spanish conquistadors. And just on a note there, like, I read something pretty terrible. If you want to read more, just search up this guy, read the quotes. Absolutely horrific. And anyone who reads that and still comes away thinking the Spanish were in any way good is just like a terrible person and is like a fascist in my opinion, because how can you not be? How can you read stuff like that and see this, and also see what happened afterwards as well, and know the context of the whole thing, and say the Spanish were the good guys in this situation? But one more thing I want to note, because a lot of people like to say that natives side with the Spanish, so therefore the Spanish were good. They wanted to stop human sacrifice. And the most prominent tribe was the Tlaxcala, and yes, they were a rare example of a group who both sided with the Spanish, and the Spanish actually didn't completely destroy their way of life. They were made to convert to Christianity, but they still retained a degree of autonomy in the Spanish system, and it's like a Mexican state today, still with some of its native identity as well. And this group actually helped the Spanish invade other territories and do more terrible things to other native groups. So they're actually like a rare example of a native group that was treated well by the Spanish, but it's because they sided with them originally and actually made their conquest of the New World even possible. And yes, from their own point of view, their own geopolitical reasons, it made sense. They were constantly at war with the Aztecs, who were a far bigger power. Although they didn't completely subjugate them, they did have to pay like tribute to them. And of course, after the wars they fought against each other, the Aztecs would take their soldiers and prisoners of war back to Tenochtitlan, and they would sacrifice them to their gods, but they would also do that to their own gods as well. So the belief that Spain came over and found a bunch of really oppressed native peoples who saw them all as the savior of their tribe and then overthrew the Aztecs for freedom and humanity is fundamentally wrong. It's basically a tribe that was at a disadvantage. Although they shared a lot of cultural things with the Aztecs, they were the main enemy. And what people don't mention is they actually fought the Spanish as well. When the Spanish first came, they went into a war with Cortez, but because Cortez defeated a lot of their armies, the chief of the tribe made an alliance with him because he saw him as a strong ally that could help him overthrow the Aztecs. There was no human rights involved here. There was no, oh my god, the Aztecs sacrificed people and we can't stand that, because they did it too. So this whole framing of history is absolutely absurd, and it is just to justify their own like racism in that the Spanish were the good guys, because they weren't. The Spanish took advantage of a political situation in Mexico for their own ends. The Tlaxcala as well, they took advantage of having a new powerful ally who had this technology that they didn't have, and they worked together, and I guess it worked out because of one of the few native groups that weren't completely destroyed culturally. But again, like I said, you have a guy who's known as like a contributor to modern human rights saying what the Spanish did in this period was just not justified at all, was absolutely terrible, even for a guy back in that time period. And he's not the only one. There are some other religious people at the time who said it was terrible. And now you have people today saying, not only is it a good thing, please change your game so me as an Aztec warrior in this game can side with the Spanish conquistadors who enacted this terrible thing on the Aztecs. Like I said, they're trying to be historically accurate while just completely throwing all historical accuracy out the window in favor of a far-right revisionist view of native history and the conquest of the New World. So hopefully that is the last I'm going to talk about this game. I mean, once it comes out, we'll see how terrible it is and how like racist it is. But yeah, anyone who's saying that the Spanish did this to stop human sacrifice, or the Spanish did this to help like oppressed tribes like save themselves from human sacrifices and stuff like that, totally full of rubbish, because the tribes they saved did the same thing. They just wanted to overthrow the Aztecs so they didn't have to pay like tribute and have to fight wars against them anymore. Cortez was a terrible person. The Spanish were terrible people. They did things so terrible, even at a period of history where a lot of this is pretty common in just geopolitical events and stuff. Even people at the time thought it was too far. And the Spanish crown, like I said, who had completed the Reconquista and was enacting like seriously terrible laws against the remaining Jews and Muslims in Spain while doing the African slave trade, even they thought, oh yeah, maybe, you know, what you're doing to the natives is a bit too far in the eyes of God. Anyway, that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.